Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the course code Eng455, lecture number 29. As you can see, today our lecture is focused on the relationship between language and society. As we have done in the area of linguistics, we have talked about the different aspects of language, the different areas, different linguists who focus language with different perspectives. Now we are moving towards another area of language study, that is language and society. The relationship, how the language it exists in relationship with society. So what is the outline of our lecture today? That is, today we will start with an introduction to sociolinguistics. Let me make it very clear that the relationship between language and society, it is established, it is studied under a separate field or under a different discipline of linguistics, that is known as sociolinguistics. Socio for society, linguistic for language. So sociolinguistics is a branch of linguistics in which we study the relationship between language and society. So after that sociolinguistics, we will see that how the language and society they are linked, that how the language and the speakers, definitely within the society they are the speakers who use certain language. Then where we will discuss a very important theory in sociolinguistics, that is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, according to which the language it reflects the society, it determines our thought. So we will discuss that society, and when we will talk about language reflecting society, at the same time, if language is an integral part of a society, so if there is any change in the society, as a result, the social changes the language. So we'll take into account that how the changes in society they are reflected through the language, and then we will talk about some important terms that are used under the discipline of sociolinguistics, and these terms let me make you here clear that this is just one lecture on the topic language and society, where we want you to give a brief introduction of what sociolinguistics is, what sociolinguistics is all about. In fact, sociolinguistics is a whole discipline. It is a complete discipline when you are when you are going through a course on linguistics. So sociolinguistics is a different discipline, and the number of topics that are there are covered under one whole series of lectures under one semester. So today's whatever I'm telling you about sociolinguistics, that is just a brief glimpse that would provide you an insight, a brief insight of what sociolinguistics is, what sociolinguistics is all about. So let's start with what sociolinguistics is. Sociolinguistics, as it is defined, it is the study of relationships between a language system and speaking in a social and cultural context. What this idea was actually introduced by Ferdinand de Saussure as langue and parole. Langue is actually the language, and the parole is the way we use that language. So langue and parole, they are two aspects within a language. So when we combine these two aspects of language, that is the knowledge of language with the knowledge of the users who use or speak that language, then that comes under the discipline of sociolinguistics. In most simplified form, the sociolinguistics is the study of structure and use of language as it relates to its social settings. If you remember our lectures on historical linguistics, we have seen that how the different linguists they talked about the importance of context in using language, in using language as a device for communicating. The context is always important, and in sociolinguistics that context defines a society, the language within a society. The context is there, and language is a part of that context. Or maybe in other words, by Sapir-Whorf hypothesis says that okay, there is a language as basic thing and the society is attached to it. So again, but these are the controversies inside the discipline of sociolinguistics. But simply, sociolinguistics is the study of a relationship between language and society. So how the language it is linked with the society. Language has a social function. It helps us to establish and maintain relationship. The biggest purpose of language is communication. and the way we communicate within our society. And we do not only communicate about our ideas and feelings and these things, we also communicate about our social relationship. We establish our relationships. If I, as for example mother, I'm not communicating to my children, I'm not interacting with my children, so as a result there would be a great gap between me and my children. So this gap is bridged by the use of language. So language is used to establish relationships. It conveys information about the speaker. For example, I am speaking to you. Now you can judge me, what kind of person I am, what kind of knowledge I have. So this way the relationship of language and society is very much important, because the language can be considered as a backbone to establish social relationships in a society. If we want to live, if we want to survive, we have to establish relationships, and to establish those relationships, language is the biggest need. Because without language we cannot establish relationship, we cannot communicate effectively. So simply, language and society, they are interlinked, because language it fulfills important social functions, like the function of a speaker, or a person who is delivering a speech. So whom he is delivering a speech? The listeners. So talking about certain topic. Or the social function of a communication, like chit chat, it is also a social function of greetings, to greet someone, or social function of asking, to making commands, okay, do this thing for me, do this thing for me, or making requests. All these social functions, they are fulfilled, they are helped, assisted by language. And again, because the language has a deep relation with the society, similarly the language has a deep relationship with the speakers who speak that language. For example, users of the same language in sense all speak differently. The kind of language each of them chooses to use is in part determined by his social background. Language in its turn reveals information about speakers. For example, the way I am talking to you, the way I am speaking, you can judge my knowledge. So you can determine what I know or what I do not know. So, or for example, a person on the street, you meet him and he talks about certain thing. By his language, you will understand what kind of person he is. Whether he is a modest person, humble person, or a very rude person, whether he is an ignorant person or a knowledgeable person, whether he is an old person, or even just take an example of telephone. You receive an unknown call by a number, and when you talk to the other person, you automatically, the person is not in view, but you can automatically judge the other person to whom you are communicating, whether it is he or she, mean you are talking to a male or a female. Secondly, you can judge the age, whether the person you are talking to is a child, is a young person, or is an old person. Number 3, whether the person who is ringing, whether he is an ignorant person or a knowledgeable person. So different things, and sometimes from the accent you can determine what area to which he belongs. For example, I'm not talking about, okay, let's leave these English, that okay, from we can identify Scottish accent or Irish accent. Talk about your own context. The Punjabi, even a person calls me and he is talking in Punjabi, but from his accent I will come to know whether he uses Chakwali Punjabi, the person belonging to Chakwal and the neighbor area, whether he is using a Patwari Punjabi, then the person belonging to some hilly areas, or he is using a Lahori Punjabi. So helping me to understand that he belongs to somewhere Lahore, or a Faisalabadi Punjabi. Means so many variations of the dialects are, and on the basis of the accent you identify not only the age, not only the sex, not only the knowledge level, but also the area to which they belong. So this way the language of the speakers, they reveal information about the speaker. They help you to understand who the speaker is, what is his level, or even if sometimes you can also judge the social status. by that the people, the belonging to a certain class uses a different type of vocabulary. So you can judge what is the social status, whether he belongs to an elite class or a middle class or a poor class. And all these things, they are reflected in the language of the speaker. And this way, within a society, we can know speakers. We can understand, can know the speakers of a language in a better way. So this way, the language and speakers, they have a relationship. To some extent, if I go further, to some extent, this relationship between language and speakers, they help us. What are the things they help us to understand? The lexicon, for example, the structure of the language, like the lexicon, the word, the type of vocabulary a person is using can help me to judge that person. What type of vocabulary you will use? From the choice of your words, I can easily identify your knowledge level, your status level, and so many other things. Similarly, on the big canvas, from the vocabulary of a society, I can identify the characteristics of the culture of that society. So, for example, English language. It helps me to, English language brings knowledge about the English society as well. It would help me to know what English society is, what kind of culture it is, the way the words, certain words are there. For example, if an English speaker wants to know about Pakistani culture, if he comes here and learns the Pakistani language, Urdu language, then he can get a better knowledge of Pakistani culture or Pakistani society. So this way, usually, sometimes the whole structure can help to identify, but most of the time, it is the vocabulary of language that helps to determine the level of a person, the variations, the knowledge of the person, the status of the person, or on the big canvas, the whole environment of the society. The words that are used in specific in a society, they would help me to know about that society. For example, look about if I learn Indian language. Now in Indian language, there are so many words which are used to represent the idea of God. Like Gau Mata, they have the Bhajan, they have the Kali Mata, and with these, while learning their language, while knowing the vocabulary of that Indian language, I can know about, I can get a picture of their culture. That in that culture, what is the concept of God? What is, how this God, this idea of God has been rooted in their culture. So language, the vocabulary of their language would help me to know about their culture. So this way, language, it is very much in a relationship with a society. Now, further to extend the same topic, that how the language, it is related to society, we can say that language is used in not only social settings but also in cultural setting. Language does not only reflect a society, but it reflects the culture of a society, as I just mentioned with the example of the Indian culture and Indian language. Similarly, we with respect to sociolinguistics, when we study link between language and culture and language and society, we pose certain questions. For example, does language influence the perception of reality and cultural behavior? Yes, it does, because language perceives the way a culture is established, the way a culture behaves. Language would reflect it. Language would reflect cultural behavior. What is the setup of a certain culture? So, does language reflect a reality in a culture? Yes, to very much, up to 80–90%. Yes, language reflects a society, a culture of a society. I know with the help of the Indian language vocabulary items inside the Indian language, if I want to know the meanings of that words, like if I want to know what the Kali Mata is, what is this Muria, or what is this word, or what is this word, so I will learn, and I will learn the context of that word, and when I will learn the context of that word, then I will get an insight into the reality of the culture. The way the cultures are composed, they are reflected in their language. and sometimes it is both. I mean, it does not only reflect the reality, but it actually, at the same time, it also reflects the cultural behavior. What is reality in a culture, and what the way it behaves, the way a culture behaves, and the way the culture is established. Then over here, with respect to this relationship between language and society, we have two major ideas of linguistic: relativism and determinism. Let me make you over here clear that linguistic relativism and determinism, these two ideas, are actually rooted in the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, it is said that it can be divided into two parts: the linguistic relativism and linguistic determinism. So the proponents of this theory, the Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf, the structuralists who talk about this relationship between language and society in a very prominent way. And then they establish that language and culture intrinsically linked. For them, a language cannot exist without a society, and a society cannot exist without a language. So their relationship, it is intrinsically linked. They are relative to each other. That is what is linguistic relativism, that language is related to culture, and these both things, they are interrelated. You cannot separate them. Secondly, language is a guide to social reality. So they put language at higher level than the society even. That is sometimes some linguists, they are against this idea, but again, I'm not talking about who are against this idea. I'm just presenting the idea of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that according to Sapir-Whorf, that actually this is the language at the top level, and this language is a guide to social reality. If you want to know a culture, learn its language. That is the easiest way. So language reflects a society. Language and exactly the words mean that I could quote from their Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. We dissect the nature along the lines laid down by our thoughts or by society. Actually, this was thought, they are calling them somehow the society, because our thoughts, ideas are determined by our society. So language determines a society. That is called linguistics determinism idea. And because language is so powerful to determine linguistic reality, cultural reality, social reality, it powerfully conditions all our thinking about social problems and processes. That is again a strong part of this hypothesis, strong part on their hypothesis, but weaker form against, because we have a lot of criticism against this thing. Now, according to Sapir-Whorf, it is language through which we can determine society, because language conditions us and powerfully conditions us, our thinking about social problems and processes. If living in a society, we acquire the language of that society, then we are bound to think and use language, to think about the social phenomena according to the language we have. And we cannot think about that society or culture beyond the language to which it is associated. So language determines culture, language determines society, language shapes our thinking about a society as well. This is a relationship. This idea is known as language and thought relationship as well, based on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, that language predisposes people to see the world in a certain way, guiding behavior. For example, if you learn a language of a society, you will see that society within the framework defined by that language. So language is defining thing for a society. For example, if I am going to learn Indian language, I am going to observe Indian culture within the framework of that language, Indian language. I am going to learn the Chinese language. I am going to see the Chinese society within the framework of that Chinese language. Because the language, according to Sapir-Whorf, language restricts us to think about a certain culture or think about a certain society within a certain framework. And you cannot go beyond that. So on the other way around, language reflects society. Again, this is something that language at top level, and it reflects society. This is language which determines society, not the society which determines the language. Mean again something objectable in Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, but again our purpose over here is not to criticize the theory, but just to present you with the theory. Because it is a well-known theory for language. Whenever you are going to study with language and society relationship, you will come across the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Now, to prove that language reflects society, what is the idea given by Sapir-Whorf? According to them, the rich vocabulary reflects a cultural focus. The words inside the vocabulary of a language will tell me that what are the specific focused area in that culture. Let's see, we have certain examples of that language determines thought. Now consider the example of English versus the Eskimos people. The English people, they have certain words, they have certain words for snow, but they are interrelated snow, like we have that heavy snow or light snow, or this kind of word they have, but they have only word for snow, one word, that is snow, and all other word they are interrelated, like heavy snow or light snow. So the word is, they have only word one, snow. But and this shows that in English society they do not have very much concern with this word snow. On the other hand, talk about people, Eskimos, living in areas covered with snow. Everywhere there is snow and snow. Houses, igloos made up of snow. They are surrounded by snow all the time, throughout the year. So their language has more words about the thing snow. So this way, because they have so many words for snow, so it shows to me that they have concern with this word snow. And they can differentiate. They have very different words for every type of snow. For example, we in English, if we have say, okay, it is the dry snow, it is fine snow, it is soft snow. But in Eskimos, they have perfect differently lexical item for every type of snow. They would call something else to a soft snow. They have a different word for a hard snow. They have a different word for a dry snow. For every type of snow, they have a different lexical item. So it means in their culture the word snow has importance, whereas as compared to them in English culture we do not have very much focus. So this way we can say that okay, the language it reflects the society, cultural patterns, cultural setup, cultural behavior of the society. So because the snow is common in Eskimos culture, so they have more words for it in their language. Snow is not very much cultural focus in English society, so they have few words for that snow in their language. I can give you here example from my own society, like because especially in Indian Pakistani culture, with respect to this marriage, we have so many words. Like our marriage is like we have Mayum, we have Mehndi, we have Barat, we have Walima. So you look at the different types of functions that are there. When we have a marriage, it means a whole 4 to 5 days ceremony. And this shows that in our culture, the thing marriage is considered very much important. Take example, compare it with English society. One day for one single day for the marriage ceremony. The same day they go to the church, the same day they celebrate it, and one day they are over with it. So it shows that in their culture the word thing marriage is not given that much importance. They do not have any other words for this thing marriage. So this way it shows that my language, because I have so many words for this thing in my language, so it means my language is reflecting my society. On the other hand, because they are not giving this thing very much value, so their language is reflecting their society. Because I am saying that language reflects society, so and when language reflects society, the vocabulary or the lexicon items are the biggest source to reflect a society. Now another example is, for example, a society's kinship system. Now in my society, in English society, what are the kinship terms? They have father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, all types of aunts, rather they are chachis, rather they are the phuppis, rather they are halas, all are aunts. Uncle, all type of relationship, whether they are chacha, whether they are taya, whether they are mamu, all the relationships named as one uncle. So few words for these, and cousins include every type of cousin, like my halazad, my mamuzad, my tayazad, my chachazad, every type of relationship for one word, cousin. So this way, this shows that in their society, because they do not have very much concern with the relationships, so their language, it has few words for the kinship relationship. On the other hand, take the example of our own language. In Urdu, we have a list of words for showing the kinship relation. We have chacha, mamu, taya, puppo, dada, dadi, nana, nani, meen, mamuzat, khalad. We have a long list of words for showing the kinship relationship. Because now this thing reflects, because in our society the relationships are given very much importance. We have more value for these relationships, so that's why our language is rich in the kinship relation, in kinship terms. So what this thing shows, again, language reflects society. Another example, the English people, they are considered to have high aesthetic sense. How? They have more words for colors. One color, and they give to every shade of it, they have different name. For example, the purple, they have the lilac word, they have the plum color, they have the purple color, and even a different variation they would name it differently. So one color and different name. On the other side, in our language, we have one word, jamni. We do not have any other color name for this one word, jamni. Any shade of purple, we will call it jamni. So it means, because the English people, they have higher aesthetic sense than us, so their language has more words for colors than us. So I am giving you all these examples to show that how the language, it reflects a society. Again, the idea that is proposed by Sapir and Wolff. Now, if language reflects society, so when there are certain changes in society, it should be reflected through language. Does it happen? Yes. As language is reflected in society in this way, social change can produce a corresponding linguistic change. Whenever there is a change in social setup, it affects the language as well. It affects the language vocabulary. And I have a very well-known example over here of the Russia. That in the case of Russian, during the period from 1860 to present day, the structure of Russian kinship system has undergone a very radical change as a result of several important events. You know, the Russia, several important events has happened over here from 1860 till now, like the emancipation of serfs in 1861, First World War, revolutionary, the collectivization of agriculture, Second World War. These different changes, they happened, they changed the society. And the Russian society has undergone a deep changes, undergone deep structure of changes inside their system. So as a result, there has been a marked social as well as political revolution. So there is a change. So the change in society has changed, made the corresponding changes in language as well. We have not only when the society got changed, it changed the language as well. For example, in the middle of the last century, if we talk about the previous century, wife's brother was called Shurin. Wife's brother. That we in Urdu we call it like Sala, in English we call it brother-in-law. In Russian language they had the word for wife's brother, that is Shurin. Whereas now it is simply brat, zani, brother of wife. Similarly, brother's wife, formerly nevestka, is now zina brata, wife of brother. In other words, distinctions that were formerly lexicalized because they were important and now made by means of phrases. The loss of importance of these particular relations are due to the fact that social changes in Russian have led to the rise of small nuclear family. Previously, what had happened, that the Russian people, they preferred the big families. They used to live in family structures, just like us in Pakistan. In few years back, we were having these ideas of big families, all the Dada Dadi and all the sisters and brothers and even the bhabis, and we had a joint family system that we call. We had that. So similarly in Russia previously there was a joint family system, but because of these different types of political and social changes, that idea of joint family system has been reduced to nuclear family system. Nuclear family system means that the father, mother and the kids. That is just like this idea is also promoting in our society as well, getting very much promotion. Similarly, when the cult and the Russia it has gone under such changes, the idea of family changed, and as a result, the words for these to show these kinship relationships, they also gone under certain changes. So this way, whenever there is a change in society, that change is reflected through language. So it means we can say that language is a mirror to a society. Whatever is happening inside a society, it is reflected through a language. And more to exemplify, in the last century, most Russians, they lived in large patrilocal extended family, as I told you, joint family system. And the brother wives at that time part of the family. Now normally they live because in the nuclear family system, so the importance of the relationship has lost, so the words has been changed, and the language reflects that change as well. Now, after discussing the relationship between language and society, now in sociolinguistics there are some important terms that you will come across while having a deep study of sociolinguistics. But I will just highlight some of the important terms that are used in sociolinguistics, like speech community, language varieties. Inside the language varieties, we have regional dialects and social dialects. Then we have idiolects, we have diglossia, we have style, context and gesture. These are some of the terms that you usually come across while studying this sociolinguistics. So now we will discuss all of these terms one by one, and we will see, only at surface level, what do they mean, what do they stand for. Let's start with speech community. A speech community is defined as a group of people who form a community and share the same language or a particular variety of language. They share one single language or they share one single dialect, and they are known as language community. Punjabi community. Punjabis, who are all the people that are speaking Punjabi. Pashto community. All the people speaking Pashto. English community, all the people who are speaking English. Chinese community, all the who are speaking Chinese. So the community, the group of people who talk in one language or in one dialect, they are referred to as speech community. Then what are the characteristics of speech community? Number one characteristic is they speak the same language or dialect. Over here you should be clear that it can be a language or it can be a dialect. For example, I say, okay, the speech community of Punjabi language, but at the same time I can have a speech community of Potohari, I can have a speech community of Lahori Punjabi. Again, the dialects inside the standard dialect of Punjabi, but again, if they are sharing one dialect, one language, they are referred as speech community. Number two, the members of the group must interact linguistically with other members of the community. They should use that specific language or dialect to communicate with each other. So linguistically, the language should be used as a source of communication. Any particular language community or dialect community. And finally, they must share their similar attitudes toward linguistic norms. That language, that particular language of a community is comprised of the things that are there in in culture, that are there in their norms. So the linguistic norms, ideas are followed. This is what is meant by a speech community. The community, the group of people using one language or one dialect. Then we have speech variety. Speech variety, or also known as language variety, refers to any distinguishable form of speech used by a speaker or group of speakers. Now the speech variety can be at both levels. It can be at individual level, it can be a social level. We can have a speech variety at according to certain groups of people, and at the same time within a single group we can have a speech variety from person to person. So by variety means any distinguishable feature of the language that makes either one person from distinct from the other person, or one society distinct from the other society. The distinctive characteristics of speech variety are mainly reflected in pronunciation, syntax and vocabulary. This change, the way one person or one society is different from the other person or other society, it is reflected through any. We can have morphological variation, the way their morphemes are different. They can have lexical variation, the way they use different words. They can have the pronunciation variation, the way we pronounce the word. Even the same word is there, but in different dialects it is pronounced another way. And we can have a syntax variation, again the way the sentences they are structured according to different reason. So any type of change is there in any of these features or in all of these features make one person or one community language different from the other person or other community or social setup. Now, speech variety is a neutral term which is often used to replace the such terms as standard language, dialect, pidgin and creole. At the top we have some pidgin, creole or dialect or standard language, but inside that one language or one dialect that we will choose, inside them we can have variation. It is not that okay, there is a variation from one language to another language. The variations from language to language, they totally change the language. These are variations inside a language, or these are the variations inside a dialect. These are the variations inside a pidgin. They are contained inside them. So these variations they are known as the speech varieties or language varieties. As I told you, for the speech varieties we have two words. Some linguists they call it speech variety, some call it language variety. Now, what is this idea of language variety? As I have explained already, that people who claim to be users of the same language do not speak the language in the same manner. This actually happens. That the people, for example, all of us speak Urdu. In Pakistan, all of us we speak Urdu, but all of us speak in a different way. So we have internal variation. Similarly, if I give you the example of Punjabi, we have Punjabi language, but from place to place, from Chakwal to Lahore to Faisalabad to Gujarat to Murree, all these areas they have a different variation of Punjabi form. So we can have variations inside a dialect, inside a person to person variations can be there. So the people, for an example, similarly all the English people, they do not speak English in the same way. And similarly the languages spoken by individuals, they have also the changes. So we have varieties, language varieties. And inside language varieties we have two types of categories, dialectal varieties and the functional varieties. Dialectical varieties, they refer to the varieties of English language according to the use. And inside dialectal varieties we have regional dialects and social dialects. Whereas functional varieties, they refer to the varieties of language with respect to users. And with respect to that, we have varieties like style, register, jargon. These terms they are mostly there. So let's start with the dialectal varieties. In dialectal varieties, there are two varieties. One is called regional and one is known as social. So let's start with regional dialects. What is meant by regional dialect? Regional dialects are linguistic varieties used by people living in different regions. According to region, one language, one dialect, but according to region, the people speak it differently. That is known as the regional variety. Again, I am giving you example of Punjabi. That Punjabi is one language, one dialect. But in the people over here in Rawalpindi, Islamabad, they have a different type of Punjabi. The people in Lahore, they have a different type of Punjabi. The people in Faisalabad, they have a different type of Punjabi. People in Chakwal, they have a different type of Punjabi. So one Punjabi dialect, but according to the regions, according to geographical position, according to places, the language it gets changes. There are certain variations inside that language. Now if I give you example of English language, now the people in North England, they speak differently from the people in South England. How? Look at this. You need your hair cutting. The people in North areas of England, they are used to say this thing. You need your hair cutting. Whereas the people in the south part of England, they speak the same thing in a way different. You need your hair cut. So again, this is called regional variety, because according to the geographical position, mean in north or south or east or west, wherever this is, the people, they are speaking English. But according to different geographical locations, their language, they have certain types of variations. If you look at the sentences, what types of variations are there? Syntactical variations. Now, lexical variations. Over here, they use hair cutting, and the other word, it is used as hair cut. So the compound nouns are different for the two regional communities. Again, I have another example, English and Scottish. English in Scotland, English is the language, standard language, but in England, the English people, they have different language. In Scotland, the English people, they have different variety of English. In English, the English people belonging to England would say it needs washing. But a Scottish person using the variety of English, speaking English, but using another variation, it needs washed. Scottish people, they used to speak like this, it needs washed. So it needs washing, it needs washed. Again, we have a variation according to the region, according to the geographical position. So such variations come under the category of regional variation. Then regional dialects boundaries often coincide with geographical barriers such as mountains, rivers, or swamps. So according to how we can define different geographical regions, according to maybe they are separated by rivers, or maybe separated by mountains or swamps, whatever. The differentiation is accounted for by the lack of communication in the old days when travel was difficult. It is said that these variations occurred when in the old days the people, they were not in communication, direct communication with each other. So in that era, these differences they developed, and then they got their position strong. With respect to regional dialects, we have two important terms, that is of isogloss and dialect boundaries. Isogloss, actually, now when we say that from region to region the language varies, then to draw that from this region to this region the language varies in certain ways. So we can draw a weak line. If the differences are not very much strong, the differences are a little bit differences are there, then we can draw a weak line to distinct those two regions. Such that weak line is known as isogloss. And if the differences in two varieties are very much strong, then we can draw a bold line, clear line, and that bold or clear line is known as dialect boundaries. And usually the dialect boundaries, they are comprised of number of isoglosses. So this is the idea of isogloss and dialect boundaries. Then, as I mentioned, that in dialectal varieties there are not only the regional variations, but at the same time we have the social dialects as well. And social dialects, as the name makes it clear, the variations in language with respect to social setup, with respect to a certain social reason. Just as regional dialect is associated with separations caused by physical conditions, social dialect has to do with separation brought about by different social situations. And social class dialect or known as also sociolect, refers to the linguistic variety characteristics of a particular social class. The special linguistic variety that shows some type of social class. Now this social class can be with respect to many reasons. For example, the dialect, with respect to social dialect, we can have a social dialect with respect to social class, like middle class, upper class, elite class, poor class, working class. So according to these classes we have language variation. So no, this is social variation or sociolect with respect to social class. Then with respect to education, the knowledgeable people and the ignorant people both would be having variations in their use of language. So this is the social variation with respect to education. Ethnicity and race, to the area or to the race to which we belong, we have variations. Age, old people, they have different language, the young people, they have different sort of language, the children, they have different sort of language. So these are the variations according to the age, again sociolect. Then we can have religion. The Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, they all have their own, they all have variations in their language, maybe because of the religion. For example, in my religion, there would be word like Allah, there would be word like Muqaddas, there would be more word like Pakizgi, Taharat. So they are the items of my language with respect to related to my religion. In Christianity, they would be having the words related to their religion. So we can have a variation, social variation with respect to religion as well. And the most important striking area of sociolinguistics is of language and gender. That language, it differs from one gender to other. The way male people they use language is very much different from the way the females use a language. So these are all of the areas where we can have sociolects, where we can have variations in language because of any of these social reasons. So you can explain them that how they interrelated. I will pick only few of these to explain it further, like language and gender and language and social class. I have picked only few because of the restriction of time. First of all, language and social class. That language, it depicts the class to which people belong. Now look at these two language samples, a speaker A and a speaker B. I did it yesterday. Speaker B, I done it yesterday. He hasn't got it. He ain't got it. It was she that said it. It was her what said it. That said it. So these two language patterns, if you are a linguist, you will automatically become familiar that the speaker A's language is more sophisticated type of language, more perfect grammatical language. So we can say, we can judge that the speaker A belongs to higher social class, whereas the speaker B is more ungrammatical, is more not ungrammatical but means sometimes something differently, and his way of talking shows that he belongs to a lower class or a working class. So this way your language shows to the class you belong. And if you want the details on it, the Peter Trudgill in his book Language and Society, the book name is Sociolinguistics, an Introduction by Peter Trudgill. He has a whole chapter dedicated to this, how the language reflects the social class. And he would talk about certain experiments, like they were performed by Labov, who actually performed these experiments to show that how the language, it differs from one social class to another social class. Then language and sex. Language differs according to the gender, and these differences between women and men have always been a topic of interest to human species, and supposed linguistic differences are often enshrined in proverbs. We have the history of these differences, that the way the people, the male and females, they use the language, we have a history for it, and this history is reflected through these proverbs. Like in England, we have a proverb, a woman's tongue was like a lamb's tail. It always keeps on doing this thing. Jutland, the North Sea will sooner be found wanting in water than a woman at a loss for a word. Foxes are all tail and women are all tongue. All these proverbs, what do they reflect? They all reflect that females, the women, they talk more than males. They are fond of talking. The proverbs, they reflect that the females, they are the fond of talking. They talk more than the male members of the society. So this way, language differs from one gender group to another gender group. Let's see another example. Now look at these two language patterns and try to guess who can be the speaker, a male or a female. The pattern is, oh dear, you have put the peanut butter in the refrigerator again. And second, shit, you have put the peanut butter in the refrigerator again. Do you guess who are the speakers? Yes, the sentence A is by a female speaker and sentence B is spoken by a male speaker. Look, and we can easily do this. We can easily identify, because now what is the thing that is showing us that okay, the sentence A is by a female speaker and sentence B is by a male speaker? Yes, because the research on language as gender has shown, and our common knowledge also tells us that the females, they are the polite speakers. They use polite forms of language than the men. The men, they use more harsh words. Their accent is more harsh. They use the harsh words. Whereas on the contrast, the females, they are the polite. They use the polite forms of language. They use the polite words to express themselves. So this way, the politeness is another area where the language differs from one gender to another gender. And this field of language and gender is very much of hot issue nowadays in sociolinguistics. We can see a lot of researches that have been done around the issue of this language and gender. We have like Deborah Tannen theory on language and gender. We have other linguists who talked about this language and gender, and you can see politeness theory. You can see the different linguists, they're coming up with the different ideas that how the male and female, the speakers of language, they use language in a different way. So what does reflect? A social variation of language. So now again moving back to language variations, but now functional variations. The variations in language according to the users, according to the speakers. And in this regard, the more important categories are style, context and register. Now what is style? Style in the most general sense refers to the distinctive way of speaking or writing. People adopt different styles in different contexts. The influence of the addressee on the speaker's language, solidarity, social closeness between participants is an important influence on speech style. The way I would talk to my colleague would be different the way I would talk to a stranger. So when I'm communicating with a stranger, I would use a different style of speech. I would be using different vocabulary items as well. But when I'm talking to my colleague, when I'm talking to my friend, my style would be different. So style of communication changes according to the context, according to the situation, according to the person to whom you are talking. We feel relaxed, very much casual when talking with our friends or with people. And if you observe, when we communicate with our friends, we use the vernacular form of language. Oh buddy, where were you? So we use slangs, we use the shortcut forms of languages, thanksy, irregular forms as well. So we because we are more informal in that situation. So this is one style. On the other hand, when we are talking to certain strangers or talking to people of high level or talking to the people at authority level, our style is different. We are more formal. So this way, according to the context, our style of language, it differs. So this is called style and context relationship. But again, in functional varieties, we have registers as well. Register. What is a register? It is an occupational style, a jargon which a group of specialists develop to talk about their specialty. For example, journalists, legalists, sport commentators. The sport commentators, in their vocabulary, you will see more words related to sports. As a teacher, my words are more related to the subject that I know. As a doctor, their language would be having more terms from the medical field. And they would, I mean, if you go to a doctor, sometimes they utter certain words, you do not know them at all. But in their profession, they have these terms, they have those words. So these are known as the registers, the occupational jargons or occupational registers. That was all about the varieties in language, and then on the basis of these varieties, we can define idiolect. What is an idiolect? Actually, it is said that language users, they do not belong to one category of geographical variations, they do not belong to one category of social variation, they do not belong to one category of functional variation. They are moving here and there. According to the function I need to perform, I will change my language. According to the social class, I would have particular features in my language. For example, as a female, I have particular features. As according to the language of the region I am living in, I have a particular features of my language. So my language reflects a combination of all these, the regional variation, the social variation, and the functional variation, and the combination together makes developed a space where I am identified through my speech, and that is known as idiolect. So idiolect is the personal dialect or the personal language comprised showing all these three features, and they occupy a space between all these different features. Then we have the term diglossia with respect to this sociolinguistics. The diglossia, what is diglossia? The speech communities in which two or more varieties of same language are used by some speakers under different conditions. Like in Saudi Arabia, there are two variations of Arabic language of Quran, and then the Arabic language that is usually spoken by the different tribes in Saudi Arabia or in any Arab country. So this is diglossia. Similarly, Java is a diglossia because it is a Javanese and Bhasha Indonesia, because it is one speech community, because they using the two or three varieties of a single language. So this is termed as diglossia. To recap what we studied about language and society today, actually this topic of language and society relationship, it is covered under a different discipline of linguistics known as sociolinguistics. Sociolinguistics that studies relationship between language and society. And we have seen that how it is language, it is a part of a society, rather it reflects a society. It is not a part of society, rather it reflects the whole society. That language and Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, if you remember, that we think along the lines laid down by our language. So we are bound to think about a society according to the language it uses. So this way the language mirrors a society according to Sapir and Whorf. Then because the language reflects a society, so if some changes happen in that society, they are also reflected with the help of language. And then finally we talked about some important terms which are used in sociolinguistics, like we talked about speech community, then we talked about language varieties, and inside the language variety we talked about the regional dialect as well as about the social dialect, that how the language it varies according to regions, and how language varies according to different social factors like class, gender, age, ethnicity, religion, social class. And then on the basis and then we had functional variation, that how the users they use their language according to either the context or according to their the field that they belong to, the occupational field they belong to. And finally the combination of all these three things create a space for a single speaker where his language resides, where his language identity resides, and that is known as idiolect. And finally we talked about a speech community who uses variations of one language within a single society, just like calling diglossia. So these were some of the important terminologies that are used by sociolinguistics and some important aspects of sociolinguistics. So if you want more knowledge, you can read certain books on sociolinguistics. That's all about today's lecture. Till the next lecture, see you. Allah Hafiz.